Well, one of the biggest differences is that an avoidant actually can heal and change. Now, avoidant,
Yes.
they can
Yeah.
actually they can learn to actually do the work and change. And I do
Mm.
routinely see a lot of avoidants that change. Actually, a lot of people that I work with are
Okay.
avoidants that are looking to change, and they can accomplish it. They absolutely can. Avoidance, just like narcissists, they do struggle to self-reflect. Well, narcissists don't self-reflect at all, but avoidants
Mhm.
have a hard time with it. But avoidance can self-reflect, whereas good luck getting self-reflection out of a narcissist.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A lot of the time, people ask what attachment style narcissists have, and it's like, look, narcissists can have different attachment styles. Like you often say, they're essentially avoidant at the core because of their inability to emotionally connect and their inability for deep emotional intimacy and things like that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what their attachment style is because a narcissist is someone that has a personality disorder. And like you said before, they can't change. And when we're looking at what type of attachment style a person has, we have to apply that to people who are normal enough, healthy enough. It's different when you're dealing with a personality disorder.
That's absolutely right. When you're dealing with a personality disorder, the best case scenario is that this person can learn to manage and regulate their behaviors a bit better.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with somebody who is severely avoidant or even severely anxious, if the person's motivated and they want to become secure and they are truly willing to do the work, which usually includes therapy um, and various other techniques, that
Mm.
person can become secure and that person can
So,
end up becoming a wonderful partner for somebody.
okay. How often does that happen though,
Not as often
particularly with
as it should.
avoidance?
So
Yeah.
um, I do see it. I
Okay.
do see it all the time, but as a percentage whole, it's a low percentage because the problem with avoidance are that they avoid self-reflection because that's painful and they don't want to face painful emotions or take accountability. So due to the lack of self-reflection, just like narcissists, they often have emotionally stunted growth. Their emotional age
Mhm.
is kind of childlike because they don't allow themselves to grow emotionally. So it is a challenge for them. It is harder to get them to do it because of how avoidant they are of self-reflection. So I would say, it's not great odds, but it can happen. It does absolutely happen
Mm. And you work with avoidance to help them to become more secure?
every day.
Mm.
Sometimes they have that light bulb moment. They'll be watching one of my videos or someone else's video, and they're like, oh my God, that's me. And
Yeah.
then they start to do the work. And it's amazing. Some of these people, you can see the transformation and the change in them. It's not that I'm waving a magic wand, it's that this person
Mm.
now has a self awareness and a commitment to actually healing old attachment wounds, changing behavior. And they can actually do this process a lot faster than you might think. Because the human
Okay.
mind learns in repetition. The more you repeat a new healthy behavior, the more automatic it becomes. A lot of it, when it comes to changing, just requires willpower, not reverting to the old emotional reactions when they're triggered and learning to respond to triggers instead of reacting.
Yeah. Okay. But would you say that that's much less common that an avoidant is actually going to go and get help and change? Because I'm just thinking of all of the people with strong anxious attachment styles that are currently in relationships with avoidants, potentially watching this, hoping that they can strong arm their avoidant into therapy and get them to change.
Yeah, your odds aren't good. I'm just going to be flat out.
Yeah.
Your odds are not good.
Just
Is
want
it
to get that
possible?
in.
Yes, but it usually requires the avoidant hitting rock bottom. Now,
Mm.
everybody's rock bottom is different. Some people never hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
But for some avoidants, that rock bottom is the point where they actually suffer the consequences of their own actions, the natural
Okay.
consequences, meaning that they lose somebody or potentially lose somebody that they actually care about because of their actions. And that can be the wake up call.
Do they feel a lot of pain initially though when they lose someone? Don't they kind of just bury it and keep rolling?
No, they don't. They avoid it. I mean, hence avoidant.
Yeah.
What they do is they feel a sense of relief after they lose somebody
Yeah.
because they're no longer pressured to be available or
Mm.
vulnerable for somebody in a relationship. And they try to avoid and distract themselves from the pain as long as they can. Now, the ones that
Yeah.
monkey branch, monkey branch being serial
Yeah.
dating, The ones that monkey branch sometimes never process it because they're always distracting themselves with the new relationship. So they never actually process the pain of previous breakups. The ones that
Mhm.
don't monkey branch over a period of time eventually get to the point where they can't bottle up it anymore and they start to actually feel the loss and the pain.
Yeah. Okay. I was talking recently to someone about trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is a type of intense attachment that forms through a cycle of abuse and repair or extreme highs and lows. And we typically see it in relationships with narcissists, between a narcissist and their partner or a narcissist and their victim. But it's interesting that a similar type of unhealthy attachment can form with an avoidant just through the cycle of inconsistencies. And someone,
It
particularly who's
absolutely
anxious,
can.
can get unhealthily, almost addicted through that cycle of inconsistencies with an avoidant. And that's certainly what happened to me in my relationship. I got incredibly anxious and it was like this intermittent like highs and lows. And I found it really hard when that relationship ended to let go.
It really can, and it's a very similar thing, and especially with fearful avoidance. So fearful
Mhm.
avoidance, they have an anxious side of them, unlike a dismissive avoidant. And the fearful avoidants are much more likely to really do prolonged sabotaging behaviors. They're more likely to drag out like the kind of devaluation, things like that. And fearful avoidants are also more likely to come back for their version of the Hoover. They're more likely to do that more often. Sometimes you can have somebody that's broken up with the avoidant 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and they keep on coming back, doing this whole
Yeah.
process: devalue, discard, come back, love bomb, devalue, discard. And this intermittent reinforcement can be very addicting. And it has a very similar effect as it does with a narcissist. Again, the
Mm.
intent is different. It really
Yeah.
is a much different intent. But
Mm.
sometimes the behavior is so similar, it can be really hard to tell with what you're dealing with.
Um, and I think it's also important to note something else that you also talk about is that it's not necessarily that a person originally has an anxious attachment. A very secure person can become very anxious in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant.
Yes, it happens all of the
Yeah.
time. So, I don't have a stat on this, but all I can go by is
Mm.
personal experience with the tons of clients that I've worked with. I find personally, at least in my experience, it's just as common, maybe slightly more common, that a person that is more secure actually gets into a relationship with an avoidant and then becomes more anxious and then becomes convinced that they're a severe anxious attacher, when in reality, they allow themselves to get sucked into a relationship with somebody who is emotionally unavailable and allowed themselves to erode their own boundaries, resulting in
Mm.
anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was never particularly anxious before that relationship. It's interesting how avoidants kind of create their own nightmare through their own inconsistencies and pulling away. I found it really interesting when I read Attached by Emile Levine, and they talk about a secure relationship and a secure base, and how, it's just knowing that they're there and checking in and being emotionally available, and that actually stops someone from being anxious and kind of spiraling and needing so much. And so avoidants kind of create this scenario through their inconsistencies. Whereas if they were just a little bit more consistent and they just checked in, they would avoid a lot of the behaviors that they fear but create.
Exactly. And here's the thing about avoidance. This is the conundrum. They actually, at their core, they long for love. They long for emotional connection. They do want it.
Mm,
But the very thing they want is also what they fear. And because their
mm,
fear is so powerful, they create the very thing that they fear. They
yeah.
create abandonment. They make it inevitable by their own behaviors. But those behaviors confirm to themselves things like, see, it wasn't going to work. I was going to get abandoned.
Yes.
Or look at what I did. I hurt another person. I am a bad person. And that
Yeah.
pushes further into the shame narrative. So their own behaviors are so self sabotaging and so self destructive. They create their own loneliness and their own pain. And then they seek further maladaptive behaviors as a way to cope and feel better. And then the cycle just keeps going.
Mm.